other community will. So I'm so glad that we're having this wonderful program tonight. I'm so grateful that you're all on with us. And, you know, we will learn tonight how to strengthen ourselves and how to strengthen others so that anywhere we dwell can be a place of safety and of peace.
Thank you, Rabbi. Sherry Rose, who...
I'm just going to say hello to everyone for a few moments. Many of you know me. I'm Rose Wachowski. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Sisterhood. Sherry Wachowski is the other co-president, and she's of course here with us today. So on behalf of the Sisterhood and the Men's Club and the Social Action Committee, all three branches have joined together to bring you this program because we think it's an important program. So on behalf of all of us, I'm welcoming you here today, and also extending my thanks to you who are joining us on yet another Zoom event. We apologize for any disappointments. You know, we had hoped to meet in person, and we hope that we can do that soon, but you know, as Rabbi Rosenthal said, the connection remains strong regardless of the medium in which we meet. So thank you for your presence, and thank you to everybody who contributed to this program. A quick thanks to our programming VPs, Cindy Feldman and Nadine Keston, and a special thanks to our social action people who helped bring this program to us, Wendy Hyman and Linda. So thank you all very much, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Wendy.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to one of our wonderful members of our Social Action Committee, Linda Leibowitz, who really put this whole program together. Linda?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Danielle SILAS. As many of you know, I am a retired criminal defense attorney, having worked for 35 years at the Nassau County Legal Aid Society. Now I'm a relatively new member of the Social Action Committee at Temple Beth Shalom. While working, my adversary was always an attorney from the Nassau County DA's office. Throughout the years, I have seen shifts in the focus of that office toward one that stresses opportunities for rehabilitation as opposed to pure punishment. That new focus is apparent in drug court, youth court, mental health court, domestic violence court, and other prosecutions. To the credit of the former district attorney, Madeline Singas, that focus helped create the hate crimes unit. Danielle SILAS has worked at the Nassau County DA's office since graduating law school in 2016. She works in this hate crimes unit under the supervision of ADA Joe Jim, who's also with us tonight. Their aim is to educate offenders of the negative significance of their criminal conduct, to incentivize them to reform their thoughts, goals, and behavior, and most significantly, to reduce the likelihood of recidivism. Ms. SILAS will share with you a bit of her life story and experiences, as well as her thoughts about hate and bias crimes, and what she and the other professionals in her office, and in the hate crimes unit in particular, hope to accomplish in our community. Please submit any questions you have for Danielle through the chat. Wendy is the only person who will see those questions, and she will pose them to Danielle at the appropriate time at the end of her presentation. Please welcome Ms. Danielle SILAS.
Hi, everybody. Oh, thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this, that you've reached out. It's always a goal of ours at the Hate Crime to do as much community outreach as we can to reach as many four corners of Nassau County as we can to kind of bring awareness to hate crimes and everything. So I just want to say thank you. I'm gonna, as they said, I'm gonna share a little bit more about my life story though. However, I'd be happy to take any questions though at the end regarding hate crimes and anything of that. So I also want to preface this with that, this is my story and I'm not speaking on behalf of the district attorney's office, but mostly just myself. I'm going to begin by reading an excerpt from the first draft of an autobiography my father wrote about his life. I just ask that you please excuse some of the language. It can be a bit harsh. It had started out as a day of adventure and exploration, riding their bikes out to the public zoo. It ended in a desperate mad run for your life while being chased by a crazed mob shouting, "Kill them niggers." The day began with an impulse decision to ride their bikes out to the public zoo. Little thought or concern was given to the fact that the zoo was outside the black part of town and squarely situated in crackerdom. Except for occasional insults, none of them had ever experienced any in-your-face racism, probably because they never ventured as far out of the ghetto on their own before. Thanks to that impulse decision, they became painfully aware of the limitations on their wanderings. The route home from the zoo took them to the Trout River Bridge. The group included Dead-Eyed Butch, Dick, aka Skinny Dick, Nard, and Lamb, my father. As they neared the end of the bridge, they noticed a group of white teenagers standing by. One hollered, "You niggers want to fight?" Lamb knew the last thing you want to do in a situation like that is show fear. "Hell yeah," he shouted, realizing that there was no other appropriate response since they had to pass them. The crowd of white boys quickly grew from 4 or 5 to a dozen or more. A car carrying an elderly black couple slowly came around the bend. To be sure, though, this was not the cavalry. One look at their faces showed their fear and absolute terror. The crowd parted, and the elderly couple wasted no time in gassing it out of there. It was time to put up your dukes. About this time, another car filled with more teenage white boys pulled up. They broke their beer bottles on their running boards as they piled out of their car. Nearby white folks came out of the little shanty towns, joining in the mob. "Kill them niggers." In the center of the circle, Lamb and the first white boy began throwing punches. They went back and forth at each other. Lamb feinted a couple of jabs and then connected with an overhand right. The fact of being targeted by this black kid infuriated the white boy. His instinct was to put an end to this fight and draw some blood. He pulled out a huge Jim Bowie knife and swung madly at Lamb. As he charged Lamb with the knife held high, ready to plunge, Lamb decided it was time to get out. But there was no time to put any distance between them. As he attempted to run, in the corner of his eye, he could see the white boy set to bring down the knife. There was not enough room to run. He braced himself. Out of nowhere, Dick clocked the white boy with the knife, knocking him to the ground. Lamb looked back relieved, but ready to get help, only to be surprised to find Dick had already ran past him and was flat out hauling ass down the street. Lamb and the other boys followed suit. The mob, in hot pursuit, had grown to cover Main Street from one side to the other. Traffic had stopped. "Kill them," was all they could hear as they ran for their lives down Main Street. The distance back to the ghetto was no less than 5 to 6 miles. Thank God they were young, in shape, and very motivated. At some point, the uproar and the traffic snarled the attention of police. Out of nowhere, a state police cruiser and a trooper appeared. Naturally, they were suspicious, because if they were being chased, they must have done something wrong. First question the trooper asked was, "What you doing over here?" The accused meekly replied, "Coming home from the zoo on our bikes." Seeing how there were no outstanding warrants or complaints against them, the troopers agreed that they should get on their bikes and get the hell out of here. Lamb and his buddies pedaled home in silence that day, all mindful and aware just how close they had come to mayhem. No one could deny that before the state police came, things looked pretty bleak. Needless to say, the experience put a chilling effect on the notion of biking outside of the hood. This was still the white and colored, segregated apartheid era in America. Lamb could never understand the civil rights activist goal of protesting to be able to sit down with whites at a lunch counter. He simply repeated to himself that, hell, if they didn't want to sit next to me, I don't want to sit next to them. This sentiment was reinforced by what little teachings of Malcolm X and the Black Muslims' let's separate philosophy that had filtered down. The correct understanding of the early civil rights movement was drilled home that day. It was not simply about the right to eat with whites at the Woolworth lunch counter. What was at stake was the right to be able to go anywhere in the United States without fear of being chased by a mob because of the color of your skin. Whether one favored Malcolm or Martin, it mattered little in those days of adjusting to the reality of segregation in the South. Now, as I said earlier, this is an excerpt from the first chapter of my father's book, where he's just a mere boy growing up in Jacksonville, Florida. Please understand that this isn't a book from a library I got about a stranger, but a story from my own father, so it is personal. My father later ran away from home, served in his country in the armed forces in the Vietnam War. He came back home, received his high school diploma, went to Marist College, and later SUNY Buffalo Law School. He worked at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office and then had a career as a solo practitioner. My mother grew up in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, to second-generation Ukrainian parents. My mother being a court reporter and my father being a lawyer actually met in court in 1982, only 15 years after Virginia v. Loving, which was a landmark civil rights decision of the United States Court, in which the court ruled that banning interracial marriage was against the United States Constitution. I mention this because, for starters, I'm a lawyer and this is kind of our thing. The second, because had the case not happened, I actually wouldn't be here. So fast forward just a bit further and we have me. I am a half Black, half white woman. I grew up in Glen Cove, went to Cornell University, then I too went to SUNY Buffalo Law School, and now I work at the Nassau County District Attorney's Office, where I am the designated hate crimes ADA. When I was born, my mother was asked the question, what country she received me from? And all my life, I heard the question, what are you? You see, I can blend. As an African-American, my best friend in high school was Sikh, and sometimes I got confused for that as well. I have been told that I have a very dark tan for being Caucasian, and let's not forget Hispanic. Most Hispanics immediately start speaking Spanish to me, assuming that I am Hispanic as well and can understand them. I cannot. I love being different and unique. However, even that can sometimes be twisted and turned based on the views of others. With one person questioning whether or not I got into Cornell University because, let's face it, I was a college's dream student with how many minority boxes I can check off for them. Fortunately for me though, aside from some identity crises and the ignorance of others, I've been pretty lucky in life. I don't have the traumatic racist and discriminatory events that my father has, or even some on this Zoom chat might have for being targeted for who they are. I don't have any of those defining moments. And why is that? Well, for the same reasons I mentioned before. I can blend. I'm able to fit into almost any crowd. And most people are less likely to discriminate against themselves as they are against others who they perceive as different. And again, I ask the question, why is that? Well, this brings me to my next topic, implicit bias. These are not the biases that lead you to have a file on my desk as a hate crime, or at least I certainly hope not. I apologize. But the biases we unknowingly have against others. For instance, here are just a few statements I want you to think about. If I wanted to, I could travel without a restriction to almost any country. I can be sure to hear my music on the radio and watch specials on TV that celebrate the holidays of my religion. I go shopping alone and expect to find appropriate accommodations to make the experience hassle-free. If I have children and a successful career, few people will ask me how I balance my professional and private lives. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or closely watched by store employees because of my race. Now, as you may or may not have caught on, but each of these represent a different bias we have against others, from the nationality privilege, religious privilege, ability privilege, gender, and race privilege. They are often unconscious and we do it almost automatically and unknowingly. I'm going to give you actually even one more implicit bias. How many of you thought or even stopped to consider that I too might be Jewish? I would venture a guess that I doubt any of you did, and that's okay, no one ever does. So let me amend my earlier statement. I am half Black, half white, Jewish woman. I am a member of the North Country Reformed Temple. Yes, I had my bat mitzvah and I was actually even confirmed. I attended Hebrew school from the 3rd grade until I graduated high school twice a week. And just this past Yom Kippur, I even had the privilege of being called to the Bima to hold one of the Torahs during Kol Nidre. However, because of the way I look, it's rarely something anyone ever thinks about. And as you have discovered for yourself, it actually, some people don't even believe me when I tell them. One person even wanted me to prove myself and my Judaism by asking me to say something Jewish, as if beginning the Via Hafta would signify that I am Jewish to this person. So let this be a reminder, like those of our sukkahs, which have open walls and doors, which are done specifically to encourage and ask us to welcome as many people as we can. Welcome as many people into your hearts and minds, no matter how different they are. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Danielle. That was really very special. I'm happy to pass on any questions that you may have for Danielle. Just go ahead and put them in the chat and I will read them. May I ask you a question? I'll start until other questions come in. You mentioned that, very often when people meet you, they don't think that you are Jewish. Growing up in your synagogue and in your community, did you feel that you were welcome? Did you feel that there were any issues that came up because of the way you look?
I'd love to be able to say that the answer to that is no, but I did. I was different than everyone else, and I was very aware of that at all times. I'd love to be able to say that even among Jews that I felt accepted, but sadly that wasn't the case.
Just a question that just came in: of the few hate crimes that are being prosecuted in NASSAU, how do they break down? Who are the victims and who the defendants are?
Sure. So I carry all the hate crime felonies that happen in Nassau County. So I don't carry any misdemeanors, which carries its own, with another 88 prosecutes, and it takes a certain level to get to where the crimes that I have. But in a sense, I kind of know all of them. And essentially, I would say that Nassau County has no more, and Joe, you can correct me on this, 20 crimes, hate crimes, in all of Nassau County. I would say that the most of them are crimes against Jews, actually. A lot of people, for whatever reason, like to draw swastikas. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what this is about, but graffiti of swastikas seems to be the most prevalent kind of case I have. After that, I would say it is crimes against gender identity. After that, it would be crimes against sexual orientation. Race actually is not a very big one. And that's about it.
Do you find that there has been, I know that the Department Against Race Crime is fairly new in Nassau County, is a separate, my understanding is a separate entity within the DA's office, that it's a fairly new division. But have you found that there has been, over the past couple of years, an uptick for crimes? And I understand the difference between felonies and misdemeanors, but in general, have you found that there is more issues of hate-related crimes that are on the uptick? Because we see them, unfortunately, so across the nation, there seem to be more and more of these. Do you find that it's the same within Nassau County, Suffolk County? Is there a difference on Long Island between Nassau and Suffolk County?
I'm not sure about Suffolk, and I think it's a yes and no answer. I think, yes, there is a bit of an uptick. However, I also think it's more to do with slightly more people report than ever have before. I think that's thanks to the outreach program of especially our new acting ADA, Joyce Smith, as well as our previous DA, Madeline Singas. They really took it upon themselves in the last year or two to create more public service announcements, and just to bring more awareness to the community of what is a hate crime and how you can report, why you should report. So.
One of the questions is, what kind of rehabilitation does the Nassau County DA advocate? Do you find that it's successful? And how do you approach educating those who commit these crimes, or even just educating the general population to be more aware of some of the things that they're doing that perpetuate this type of hate?
So I think,
Wendy, can you guys hear me? I just wanted to kind of just to clarify the record a little bit. So the hate crimes unit has existed in Nassau County before I took over as the head, and the previous head, actually she retired from the office. She's a part-time ADA, but extremely talented Jewish woman, Karen Stettner, who did a lot of work and even did quite a bit of outreach. So I just want to make sure that the record is clear that it did exist before and that there was excellent work being done before. I think there are some steps that we've taken that are a little bit different, but a lot of that has to do with sort of the availability of resources that have come out. So Danielle's going to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you.
so resources being, we recently instituted a program. It's called the Queens Counseling for Change. And essentially, I can put a defendant of a hate crime in jail or on probation. And I think what would happen in a situation like that, as I was telling one victim today, they're probably just going to get more angry. They're probably going to double down in their views and belief that they are there because that person got them in trouble. But what we're trying to do now is get to the root of that cause as to why they believe that it was okay to say what they did or did what they did. So at the Queens Counseling for Change, I was just talking with them the other day, and they take a three-prong approach. One is for education, bias education specifically, as to the ramifications that bias has on the community, on themselves. The next approach is anger management. Usually these things are dovetailed with their inability to control their anger, and that's why it kind of escalates. And then the final thing is more of a clinical approach that sadly, a lot of these individuals deal with also some type of mental health issues, so that addresses that issue, and as well as what caused them to even have the bias in the first place. It could be a whole host of reasons, from the way they grew up to where they grew up, and etc. So we're trying to deal more with that kind of approach to hate crimes. Not that it wasn't dealt with previously. We did try previously, but we're now trying with this new program to more push that than anything else, especially jail or probation, because that's not, the idea is to put them back into society as a contributing member of society. And jail might not sometimes always be the case for these kind of individuals.
Since we've generally seen an uptick, unfortunately, in anti-Semitic incidents throughout the nation, and you mentioned certainly within Nassau County as well. How do you recommend dealing with this type of an uptick? And how do we communicate with the general population to try and quell some of these things? There's a second part to this question, but I'm going to let you answer the first one first, if you don't mind, and then move on.
I think first thing is to familiarize yourself with what is a hate crime. And I think that's something that
You should let Leia know.
Thought I had everybody muted. Sorry.
it's okay. I think you had kind of wanted to address more what a hate crime is and have more seminars. So I won't really go into a bunch of that now, but familiarizing yourself with what is a hate crime, knowing how to recognize it. And if you are either a victim or a witness of it, documenting. As a prosecutor, I can't tell you how important it is to document everything that happens, whether it be a screenshot, whether it be a video, whether it be a post on social media that you see, anything that you can help me to be able to gather my evidence to prove is so helpful. This is one crime, unlike, I think, Joe, you can correct me on this, unlike any other crime except for murder, I have to prove intent. I have to prove the bias, essentially. And sometimes it's very hard to just prove that based on its face. I have to go into the history of the person, the history of their post on Facebook, to show that there's more to it than just someone calling another person a derogatory name. So any type of evidence that the public can gather is crucial for me.
I think we had, when I met with you, which was you and Joe, we had the conversation also about how there is a difference between things that actually evolve into something that's really criminal, but yet gets fed into by other types of prejudices that then can unfortunately turn into a crime. And one of the questions that came through is that how can people in a one-on-one situation make others be more sensitive? Anything about making them more open and respectful of religious differences, racial differences, sexual identification differences, etc.
We had a CLE a few weeks back that had to do with gender identity and sexual orientation. This one woman in the office, Autumn, she came forward, and I think her answer is the best I could give here. Just talking about it sometimes helps, and being able just to educate people. So for instance, with sexual orientation, she said, you know, if we all kind of introduced ourselves and also at the same time said what pronouns we would like to hear and what we identify with, I think that is talking about it more and making it less of a stigma to talk about it sometimes help. So I was talking to someone recently and they said last week, Happy Yom Kippur. And I was like, oh God, not a happy holiday, but I appreciate the sentiment nonetheless. And then I had to educate them as to why that wasn't the appropriate response to this holiday. And they took it in grace and they said, thank you for educating me. I appreciate you saying that. Now I know. And I said, I didn't mean to offend. I didn't mean to come off as high-handed. I just wanted you to know for the next person, if you meet another Jew or when you meet another Jew, maybe not the best thing to say off the bat. So I'm of the opinion education is knowledge, knowledge is power. And sometimes if you just educate people, they're more likely to be receptive of it instead of letting them blindly go out and make the same mistakes again.
The question is, what's the difference between a hate crime versus, for example, an anti-Semitic act, or something or a comment versus a crime? Where does that line get
okay. I think Joe's I might have to let Joe take over for this one. He's a little bit more well equipped than I am at this point for those kind of questions, but I think so. If I yell at you, how many, and I use the N-word, how many people would think that that is a crime? Probably not. However, not. And if I am yelling at you, but also threatening your life in doing it, you would be right. If I spit at you and also use derogatory words, if I hit you with a crowbar and use derogatory words, all crimes. But sometimes they don't rise to the level of it. Oh God, Joe, I think you're gonna have to take over from here if you wouldn't mind. He's much better at this than I am.
Yeah, we were just gonna have a follow-up. We have a whole PowerPoint presentation. I think a lot of these specific questions need some time and nuance, but just as Danielle was pointing out, sort of the lowest level hate crime that exists, basically words alone typically are not crimes. You can't get arrested for words alone most of the time. But in the case of something motivated based on race or ethnicity, anything that would qualify as a hate crime, when you use words and you actually threaten to make physical contact with them, that will be a crime that someone can actually get arrested for. So if they insult you based on your race, that alone isn't going to be enough. But if they make physical contact with you, so they insult you based on your race and they push you, for example, or in the case of the anti-Asian violence, one of the disturbing trends were that people were spitting on. Actually, we had an incident recently. An ADA, a prosecutor in the Bronx, his girlfriend got spit on while they were saying China virus, and it was reported because she normally wouldn't have reported it, except her boyfriend was a prosecutor, was like, hey, that's a crime. So it got reported, and this person actually did get identified and arrested. So that will be a crime, but typically just spitting on someone wouldn't be a crime. So I think it's important that you know that that's sort of the lowest level difference between hate speech versus hate crimes. And also I think it's important because a lot of a lot of prosecutors don't know the difference, right? So like we specialize in this. A lot of police are not going to necessarily know that that's illegal. So I think it's one of those things that part of the information campaign that we've been doing is to let people know that is the line. But I think also one thing that we've really been stressing on people is that it's not your job to sort between whether it's a crime or not. It really isn't. Something like that comes up, you feel fear, you should be reporting that. And that's important to us and it's helpful to us because those reports that don't end up in arrests, that person, you're probably not the first person they did that to, and they escalate, right? Like an incident there is going to turn into another incident, is going to turn into another incident. And if we don't have that data point, if there's no police report that we can go back to show that something had happened before, then what happened to you just sort of disappears. And then now we're just stuck with that single incident where we have to prove what they were thinking or what they were doing, when in fact, the incident with you and the incident with the other person, it's clear that this person is clearly engaged in this type of bigoted behavior.
Does your office also work with civil organizations? So for example, if I called and I said this, I experienced XYZ, and it doesn't rise to the level of a crime, do you work with civil organizations that you can then refer somebody to so that they could actually work on the educational piece? That's not necessarily criminal, but unfortunately sometimes can lead to that if left unchecked or uneducated.
So yes, we do. There was a case that I got about a few weeks ago where a person was declined fare of a taxi. And during the conversation back and forth between the customer and the driver, the taxi driver said in Spanish, Moreno. And Moreno simply just means dark skinned. However, sometimes I guess it could be construed as a negative word as well. But it was almost reported as a hate crime. However, we then referred it to the Office of Human Rights or Civil Rights, I believe, and they took it from there. So because there was not quite a crime and we couldn't prove the bias behind it, we do sometimes refer them out to other agencies that can help where we can't.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult part, is how do you sensitize people so that they sometimes they utilize language without necessarily even understanding how hateful that language is. And when that becomes accepted within society, sometimes it gives permission for people to go one step further and one step further and one step further. And then unfortunately it crosses that line into your jurisdiction. So, I mean, we were talking about, hopefully working with you and some other organizations on how can we combat these types of things before they rise to a criminal area, and just hopefully be able to deal with the hate aspect of it before it moves on to that next step.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Wendy, if I could, I just wanted to jump in and say that's exactly, I mean, one of the major things that Danielle and I are working on is building partnerships and also finding resources. It's very difficult right now because of the pandemic and everything else that's going on. And I think things are changing in terms of how we can approach, developing programming for communities, and also developing programming for defendants. There were resources that we had before. Now they're not taking people that were accused of hateful incidents towards Jewish people at some of the partners that we had before, because of safety concerns, and also because, like you can't even get regular people into these locations. And now if we want to take them to the Holocaust Museum, it's just becoming more difficult. So we're always looking for partners and people that can help advance that conversation, particularly with respect to people who commit hate crimes that are anti-Semitic in nature. Like, what can we do? Can we develop some in-house programming for education and to open things up? Because I think that's a really big part of it, is that a lot of people's biases come out directly from a source of ignorance. You don't know, and then it becomes like this thing that lashes out. And I think, especially with our swastika incidents, that a lot of them are younger children, so they don't even understand the full impact of what it is that they're doing, because they're young. You know, we have a 10th grader who committed one act, and you know, and a lot of people do as well. But the point is that we would love to have more partners who can help us in addressing offenders and in addressing communities, and working together to try to fight against the scourge.
They're asking, somebody just asked, is do you partner, or would you consider partnering something like the Kuffenberg Holocaust Center? That really is, I don't know if you're even familiar with the organization, but they, even though it's a Holocaust Center, they really have put a huge amount of effort into anti-hate education, not just surrounding Jewish people, but in general, to try and educate people on so many of the issues that we're talking about. So I don't know if that's something that you do partner with, or.
Yeah, absolutely. Just Wendy, just get in touch with me offline, send us. That's definitely a conversation that we want to have. So please send that our way, and we'll follow up offline.
That was somebody had said that the person that just gave you the 2 thumbs up. She's the one that said.
Thanks, Cindy. Send it to Wendy. She'll get it to me. Okay.
But they are, yeah. No, it's a great organization. It truly is. You know, just taking a step back for a second, and I know that a lot of the schools in the area have tried to do this, but somebody had sent in a piece about how there was something that was scheduled within their school for Sukkot. And they went to the faculty and they said, you know, this is a Jewish holiday, and you really should not be giving this particular exam on Sukkot. And the answer they got was, well, at least it's not Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. So I mean, the part of it, or and then another answer that I know, somebody who got this from somebody was, well, what would you do if, you know, this was a Sikh holiday, or if it's a Muslim holiday? And the kid was smart enough to turn around and say, I would tell you the same thing, that you should be giving the exam on those holidays. But that type of sensitizing, you know, is something that I think is extremely important. And, you know, I think it's great that you're, I don't know if I'm using the right term, bureau, division, I'm not really sure what the correct terminology is.
Unit is fine.
I'm sorry?
Unit.
Unit, okay. That your unit would work with, would be great if you would work with the community to try and do some of the sensitization, and hopefully we could short circuit this so that it doesn't wind up on your desk, you know, as a felony.
I appreciate that.
Another question, do you find that there's any difference in the age groups of offenders?
Yes. Yes, they're either very young or slightly old, to be honest. There's nothing in the middle.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if it's because they're young and or ignorant and have not been educated, and if they're older, seasoned, experienced, just they're stuck in their ways and how they never were taught otherwise.
Well, I'm going to actually turn the, okay, one last question. I'm going to turn the floor over. Do you think that schools should be partnering with you as well?
We certainly have definitely tried. After the Port Washington incident, we definitely went to the schools there, and we gave a talk to the administration about what can be done moving forward and how to educate the children as far as preventing incidents like the 10th grader drawing a swastika on a preschool.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn the floor over to, I'm not sure, Cindy or Nadine, for them to thank you. But before they thank you, I would like to extend my thanks to both Danielle and to Joe. And hopefully this will be the beginning of a relationship that the synagogue will be able to, and the community will be able to work with you on really getting some of these educational programs out, perhaps working with our school and other people, other organizations in the area that are working on these hate crimes. I think the one thing, unfortunately, that has come more to the forefront is that we've seen more and more of these things. I don't know if they're being reported more or we're seeing it more, but there is a feeling that there's more tolerance, perhaps, for some of this hatred within the country, within our community, and we would love to circumvent that. And really, thank you very much for wanting to partner with us on working on those things. So I thank you both very, very much for joining us this evening. And I'm sorry we can't give you good food, but we'll have you back because that's what we do. Not that we're going to go to all the stereotypes, but we do like to feed people. We will have you come back, and I promise we will give you a good meal. So I'm not sure, Cindy or Nadine, which one of you is going to?
Yes,
I believe yourself. Okay.
I think it'll be me. I do want to have Nadine wave hello, if she could. Wave.
She did.
She
You don't
did.
necessarily see the screen.
I can't see. So anyway, first of all, on behalf of Sisterhood Men's Club and the Social Action Committee, Ms. Silas or Danielle, as I feel that you shared something so personal, I feel that I know you. And I thank you and really appreciate what you are doing. I want to thank you for your insights and from such a personal point of perspective and your courage to address the hate head on in your daily life and in your work, and your dedication to bringing justice to those who are direct targets of this kind of hate. And we support you in your work and appreciate what you do every day. And, then also I want to thank Linda Lebovitz, a synagogue member who has been an integral part of this Social Action Committee from its inception, for bringing tonight's speaker to our virtual sukkah. And once again, Sisterhood is very grateful to Wendy Yeager-Hyman, who networks every year to bring a thought-provoking speaker to our community sukkah. And Wendy, you truly inspire us to do better and to be better and to reach higher and higher. Le'ela, le'ela. And to never accept what is when we can make it better. And Tikkun Olam is your passion, and we are fortunate to be that you are a part of our community. And last but not least, I want to thank each of the people who have attended tonight's program. We can and will make a difference if we stand up and use our voices and our feet to affect change. Never again. And I just want to remind everyone that we do have 2 organizations that we are asking people to donate to that fight hate as well, which is the ADL and also the Kupferberg Holocaust Center. And if you would please, if you haven't done so, consider making a donation. And I do want to point out that there is an ADL walk against hate on October 10th. And after this program closes, I will send that link to everyone so that maybe we can meet in person and do something really together. And just a few brief announcements about upcoming Sisterhood events. On October 7th, we are going to have a Rainbow Challah baking event, and I just ask you to save the date. Registration information will be sent out when our fabulous graphic designer returns from a well-deserved vacation next week. I apologize for the short notice. And on Thursday, October 28th, there is an art lecture from about famous Jewish women artists, and that will be announced as well. Rose Warshawski has someone close to her who is an incredible art historian, a very gifted art historian, so that will be great. And I also just want to remind everyone, if they could, we are self-funded. We do not have a budget that we don't receive anything from the temple. And we do ask that you support us with our fundraisers, and we have a plant sale. This is just so that we can bring you programming that's, meaty like this and other things, and to just create community. And I am so grateful to be a part of this, and to know each and every person who participated on every level. Thank you so much. And from strength to strength, have a good night and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. And Hag Sameach, we have more holidays coming up.
Yes, Chag Sameach. Ay, ay, ay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
all. Well done.
Thank you. And
Thank you,
Cindy, thank
guys.
you for,
Bye.
You. Thank you.
Thank
Cindy,
you,
for
everybody.
making the Kupferberg Center part of that recognition and the donations. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. I believe in it. It's a great place. And thank you for all the work you do with them.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
all.